And we are live. Okay. Hello everybody, Glass Half Dead here, and my two top tier patrons, Bazzy731, very flow off the tongue name, and Zero
Yeah.
Stride. Um, Zero Stride, I've met you before. We met at SoCal. Bazzy, never met you. But obviously you are both members of my cult, apparently. So, today we're going to talk about secondary objectives. Why are we talking about that? Well, that's because in June 27th and 28th of next year, 2020, I am going to be running a tournament at the London Grand Tournament, which I'm very excited about. However, to do that, I want to make it, the best it can be. And I do not believe that the current form of, the default form of Kill Team is the best that Kill Team can be. So I'm creating my own tournament pack. Now, that means I'm having to do a lot of thinking, which is something nobody really likes to do, obviously. A lot of theory crafting, not about numbers, but about what makes the game good and what kind of gameplay experience I want people to have when playing my tournament pack. A lot of people throw around in my Discord the term NPE, which is negative player experience. Obviously, that's not something I want. And I believe that most of the game, using the core of Games Workshop's rules, obviously I don't really want to modify them, can be modified and adjusted to the point of balance through what I have termed as the meta rules, which are things outside of the core game. For example, the missions, the objectives, etc. And I think we all know that is true, as obviously, for example, a particularly strong faction, some people might say, is Tyranids, when they're running a 20-man list, versus, let's say, 3 Custodes, which, whilst on paper are very, very killy, actually cannot win. Like, I don't think there's any way they can win, really, as long as the Tyranid player knows how to play the game. Or they get... even with really bad rolls, I think the Custodes player would still... Or, the Tyranid player would still win. In the current form of Kill Team. Now, I'm not actually saying Custodes should be competitive or anything like that. They're just a great example to use because, of course, they are the absolute minimum number of models you might ever run. 3, or they can even go to 2, against the maximum, which is 20. So let's talk about secondaries. Right, I've retaken notes because I knew that I wasn't going to be able to remember any of this. I suppose whilst we're here and I'm looking for notes, are we actually live? I assume we are.
Yeah, we should be.
Okay, sounds good. So, secondaries. Yep, so this is the design philosophy behind secondaries. What are secondaries attempting to make you do? This is the big question. Everything past this first question is just me diving more and more into things that I don't actually have answers for. They are me, throwing out the initial question without any answers. I don't pretend to have answers at this point. Hopefully I will get answers, and that will obviously inform my tournament pack. So, the core question is, should a secondary objective be rewarding a player or pushing a player? Now, when I say rewarding and pushing, what I mean is a reward is you are playing the game this way and you are getting extra points for playing that way. For example, cut apart is a rewarding objective. You are almost certainly going to kill something at some point in a game of Kill Team. Hopefully, you'd like to imagine. And when you do that, if you have cut apart, you get a reward for doing something you would have done anyway. Makes sense. A pushing objective, secondary objective, is... I can't say the word rewarding now, can I? A pushing objective is giving somebody a point for doing something they would not be doing in a normal game of Kill Team. Of course, when I say a normal game of Kill Team, what is a normal game of Kill Team? I'm getting on a tangent already. I'm not going to go down that. Let's try and stay focused, guys. So if we assume that objectives didn't exist, you're going to kill stuff. Any sort of killing objective is what I would probably term, unless it's weird, which we will get into later, a rewarding objective. Whereas a pushing objective might be, for example, recon sweep. There are very few times when you would actually, in the normal course of a game, need to go into the enemy's deployment zone. So that is a rewarding objective versus a pushing objective. Now, that's the core concept laid down. What are secondaries supposed to be doing? Is it good to have a mix? Should they all be one? Should they all be another? I've heard a lot of people say different things about it. I'm not going to say any names, but I believe some people that... No, that's going to tell you who they are. Some people believe that you should be rewarded for playing the way that you were going to play anyway, which, to my mind, doesn't really make much sense. Now again, I haven't thought this through entirely, but a rewarding objective seems rather... What's the point? If you're only going to have rewarding objectives for things you were going to be doing anyway, why not remove secondary objectives? In my mind, the primary objective is what you are there to do. A secondary objective should be something you would not normally do in a game. I don't believe that the current list, or the current roster, to use the kill team terminology, of objectives, secondary objectives, are actually the best example of good objectives. Not that I think all of them are bad, not that I think any of them are bad, I'm not saying that. I'm just saying some of them are kind of weird. Right, I'm now going to throw out types of secondaries because I've written them down. I believe there are about 7 or 8 different types of objectives. There are kill secondaries and positional secondaries. I think those are obvious, those are very clear. We all know what those are. There are also, and I'm just going to say them all now, better than opponent secondaries, end of game secondaries, deny secondaries, and activation secondaries. There might also be elected secondaries. Classic examples of this are high profile targets, cut apart, and bounty hunters. Positional secondaries, we all know them, we all hate them, or love them, if you play a horde team, obviously, which would be recon sweep, engage on all fronts, and scout the field. However, no, that's a tangent, we'll come back to that. Better than opponent secondaries. So these are something that aren't really in the game at the moment. But obviously these are something I'm considering. Oh, well, yeah, they are in the game, sorry. But they are something that I quite like the idea of, and I think could be built upon. These are things like, it's not obliteration, it's not cut apart. I can't remember the name of it, but it's where you have to kill more than your opponent. That is the only one that is currently in the game I've seen that is what I have very obviously termed better than opponent secondary. So it's where you have to do something more than your opponent does. There are end of game secondaries. This is where, so obviously when you score most of your secondaries, it is at the end of the turn, or phase even. You score your secondary then, and you probably get 1 point. End of game secondaries are something that, again, not really in the game. They almost are in a sense, because they are just timed. They are timed secondaries. So, for example, but this is kind of the opposite way around, with the one where you have to kill the leader. I can't remember what that's called. If you kill them on turn 1, you get more points than if you kill them turn 4. However, obviously I'm thinking of it the other way round, where if you take it, obviously, when you pull your secondaries, where you draft your secondaries at the start of the match, and then if you do X by turn 4, by the end of the match, then you get X number of objectives. Now that could depend on what you've managed to do, or just whatever. There's actually, I'm going to move over to this in a second, but there's an example of that in Kill Team Stream's upcoming Slaughter Zone pack, which I quite like. There are deny secondaries. Now, I'm not sure if there are actually any deny secondaries currently in the game, but this is a pretty obvious one where you deny your opponent something. There are none in the game, but so for an example, you could perhaps pull a secondary that is if your opponent doesn't get a kill, or if your opponent doesn't score any objectives this turn, something like that. And obviously there's a scale, so obviously objectives are huge. So you could perhaps say that if your opponent doesn't score any objectives this turn, then you get 3 CP, because that's huge. But if you have a slightly more basic task, then you might only get 1 CP. Who knows what that could be, if your opponent doesn't get a kill, something like that. And then activation secondaries were my final one that I listed there. I can't remember what I meant when I wrote that down, but it probably means something very insightful. So yeah. Okay. Moving on from that briefly, because I haven't quite finished my spiel. For anybody out there, this was going to just be a video that I did on my own. But I decided to bring my higher tier patrons in here to tell me their thoughts live, give me live feedback instead of just in the comments where I can ignore them. So, let's see. Let's go straight to Survivor. So this here is the... Have I printed out the title page? No, I haven't. Good stuff. Okay. So this here is a printout of the PDF for Kill Team Streams tournament pack for Slaughter Zone? Slaughterfest? Can't remember what it's called. Which is a pack that I really like some of what he's doing. I really don't like some other stuff that he's doing. But I think that we're both approaching the building of a tournament pack in a slightly different way. So I understand why he's done some of the stuff that he's doing, even if it means I would not use it in my own tournament pack. But I'm going to read to you Survivor. Now, this is a secondary objective that is not included in Annihilation or the SoCal pack. It might have been in Nova or what's the other one? Adepticon? I don't know. Right. Survivor. Pick a model from your kill team before the battle begins. Reveal this secondary to your opponent at the beginning of the battle and reveal which unit you have selected. If at the end of the battle, this unit is wholly outside of your deployment zone and still on the battlefield, score 3 victory points. If this model has 0 flesh wounds, 2 victory points if they have 1 flesh wound, and 1 victory point if they have 2 or more flesh wounds. This model cannot be in reserve. For anybody wondering, the reason you couldn't... I said that in a weird way is because half of the PDF didn't print. But basically, if you elect a model at the beginning, if it stays alive, you get 3 VP. There you go. I quite like that as a concept. I also... you also have to reveal which model it is that you actually... that you elected. I like that as it gives the... It's very interactive. It is simultaneously giving both you and the opponent an objective. Your objective is to keep something alive. Their objective is very actively to kill that one specific model, which hopefully will make for some really interesting decisions. So in a, maybe, obviously you're going to be trying to keep that model hidden, away from anybody, and they obviously are going to try and be killing it, and they may well be in a situation where they might have to get one of your models off a point or kill that model, and that's interesting. That's a juicy little morsel of choice, player choice. See, that's not a negative. That is the opposite of a negative play experience. That's a positive play experience, and I think that kind of dual objective should be played upon a lot more when it comes to secondaries. I really like it. Now, obviously, I think the survivor one that Sheldon's written there is kind of the obvious one, where it's pick a model, keep it alive. But you could do anything else. You could do it the other way around. You could select an enemy's model, assassinate, effectively. Select an enemy model. If you manage to kill it within X, then you get Y. And that would not only give both of you a different set of decisions you'd have to make in every different game, but it would also potentially make them have to completely rethink their strategy, because obviously you would put assassinate on something that you know is going to charge directly into your lines. Or you could put it on their leader, but then they probably protect their leader a lot. So, a lot of thoughts to be had. Or, again, something like... and again, I genuinely have not thought about this much, but select one of the objectives on the board. If your opponent controls that, you gain 1 VP. Something like that, right? Now, obviously, you wouldn't put that in every single mission. For example, you might only put that in a mission where there are 5 or 6 objectives, and the enemy needs to hold 1, 2, 3 more, etc. So you're not cutting them, you're not forcing them to take an objective. But let's say you play that on the objective closest to the enemy. Suddenly, okay, well, they kind of don't want to capture it. Or you could play it on the middle objective, where you know they're going to be taking their own 2 objectives. If you deny them, essentially, or deny them with a very difficult choice, the central objective, then perhaps that will, again, change the flow of the game. And I have talked for long enough, as this has been about 20 minutes of solid me talking. So, whilst we're here, before we hear from the beautiful patrons, Bazzy, as you're above me in the list, I don't know why that is, having some weird hierarchy issues there. Do you want to give a little bit, just very briefly, do you consider yourself a competitive or a casual player?
I'm definitely more of a casual player. I have a small group of friends that we usually play with, and we're about, 12 people or something like that. So I play mainly with the same, 11 people over and over again.
Hey, that's a pretty good sized group, to be honest with you.
Yeah.
Yeah. What teams do you normally play?
I'm switching it up quite a lot. I start off with Death Guard,
Nice.
but now I'm at the Servants of the Abyss, which I'm playing in a campaign we're doing, and we're cleaning house.
Cool. Okay. So you're more of a casual player. Good to know. Zero Stride, would you say you're more casual, more competitive?
Definitely more competitive.
Yep, so that is obviously you've both already told me your answers about that before. So I knew that. But okay, cool. So let's go. So obviously this is a competitive thought to be having. Or at least that's the way it might seem on the surface. But then I've always been a big proponent that everyone should play a balanced game, I personally do not feel that providing somebody with a perfectly balanced game should detract from anybody's play experience. Because if you're a casual player and you don't like something, well, you just don't play it. Whereas a competitive player always needs the balance. A casual player may not need the balance, and therefore can modify it if they don't like a specific thing. For example, I think we all know a lot of casual people do not like that you can shoot the tip of a sword, right? That's a pretty obvious one, and in a casual game, I totally get behind that. You can only hit main body, arms, legs, head. I've played that version of Kill Team before. That's fine by me. But when it comes to competitive, we play the way the rules tell us to play, very specifically, very anally, according to my rules channel, and that's how we do it. So, let's go with the casual voice first. Maybe that will temper my excitement or no, my zealotry. Maybe that will temper my zealotry into thinking about secondaries quite so hard. Bazzy, how do you feel about secondaries? What I've just said.
Secondaries are fairly new to me. I've picked up Arena just a few months ago and just played a couple of games in it. And I recently competed in a tournament, and a lot of people there had their first like stint with secondary objectives, so it was a lot to new people, or a lot new people to it. And as you talked about, they're basically just split up into position or killy objectives. I think the outlier might be bounty hunters because it's dealing with. I mean, it's still a killy objective, but with those markers, it's a little bit different thing because they're both in melee and shooty kills. So I think that's sort of it's in a category of its own. I don't know if you agree.
Sure. Yeah, most other kills do tend to be, in the fight phase or in the shooting phase or with the readied model, etc. If we take it back to the core premise of, let me check my notes and remember what my core premise was. Should the secondaries be rewarding secondaries or pushing secondaries? What are your thoughts on that? Would you rather be rewarded for something you were already doing, or pushed to do something that is arguably outside of your comfort zone?
I think we need a mix of both because, uh, like I said, I played servants now recently, and when I played in tournament, I found that a lot of matches were like really stacked against me because I couldn't do much in shooting, for instance, with that team, and it's I think you need a little bit mix of both. It's really a big question with secondary objectives because yeah, how do you balance them? Of course they're going to favor a lot of like different teams. Like you say, the custodies have no chance of doing the positional stuff, like engaged in all fronts is impossible for the custodies, and it's a really tricky tightrope to walk, I guess.
Okay, fair enough. Over to Zero Stride. Did you have any thoughts about the core premise specifically?
Yeah, but I also wanted to, just with regard to casual versus competitive
Yeah.
play and objectives, it's my opinion that clear rules and balanced gameplay are more important to casual than they are to competitive. And the reason is that when you're playing in a competitive environment, um, adjustments can be made, and they're made in the tournament pack, and you know ahead of time, and you're preparing for them. Whereas with casual play, it's friends playing friends, and it should be a more relaxed environment. And there isn't as much of a neutral arbitrator in the form of a judge or a tournament official that's going to be able to step in. And so when you have balanced gameplay and when you have clearly written rules, that eliminates conflict, it eliminates friction, it eliminates uh, arguments that you are having with friends that might not be so dispassionate as a judge making a ruling. And so I think that for the health of the game, even more so as a game that you play in a garage, that balance and clear rules writing are important. I hope Games Workshop maybe listens to that, but they probably won't. I don't know.
Fair, fair. I mean,
Um,
just to very quickly make sure we're not straw manning anyone here. Bazzy, step in. What are your thoughts on super precise rules? Like, do you guys house rule stuff?
Yeah, some like we usually play what we call a true line of sight. So basically, just can your model physically see that model? So we usually don't play like we touched on the tip of the sword thing.
Yeah. So you don't play that way.
Usually no. Usually
Okay.
no.
Fair enough. And so you guys are happy to know that that's not the, and you can't see, but I'm doing finger quotes here. You guys are happy to not play the correct way because you find it a more enjoyable experience. You don't really care about, well, I, th- I think there's a slight difference between balance and clear rules. I agree with Zero that we can balance the rules however we want with the tournament pack, but we can't write clear rules. I do think that all the rules should be clear, but I don't think they have to be balanced for casual play.
Sure. It was just more of a when you're in that casual setting and you don't have a judge or an official, you're arguing with your friends
Yeah,
and or maybe people who are just casual acquaintances, and you know in that case a dominant personality may win over somebody else when actually it should go the other way. And really I think that when you can look at rules that are very clear, there's no that there's less of a chance for kind of basically the that negative player experience where you're like, well, I just came here to drink beer and have fun, and here I thought I could attack something I didn't charge, and that sort of thing. um,
yeah,
but
no,
anyway,
I
that
understand.
was kind of a tangent.
No,
The
yeah, sure.
regarding the categories of secondaries. um, yeah, I'm kind of two minds. So on one hand, uh, I I'm in favor of pushing secondaries. I guess I
Okay,
should just say this. I'm in
cool.
favor of pushing secondaries because um, I think that the rewarding secondaries come down to some games it's free points, and some games you say, why did I rely on thin their ranks? I couldn't make an out of action roll, I only killed one model a turn, or I only killed one model the whole game, when Zangor should beat guardsmen in close combat, but sometimes the dice just seem to not work out that way. So I think there's the problem with rewarding secondaries is that they either come down as free points, or they should have been points that you could have relied on, but the dice said no, and so
To
that makes for a
interject
really
there,
strange choice.
um,
Yeah.
maybe I'm wrong, but I just want to double check. You specifically chose a killing objective. There are, of course, pushing objectives. No, rewarding objectives. Sorry, that domination, for example. Um, you were probably going to be on that point anyway, right?
Yeah.
That's a
No,
reward.
that's true. That's true.
So is your
Yeah.
issue just with killing secondaries?
Yeah, my personal vendetta is against killing objectives. Yeah,
Okay.
I think that it's not the concept of them. I feel it's kind of my hill to die on. Is I feel as though most of the problems in Kill Team come from the injury roll, and I think the injury roll itself comes from needing to paper over 40k stat lines and saying like, well, it can't just be an instant slaughter fest. We have to limit that somehow. And
Hmm.
so kill objectives, I guess, yeah, kill objectives specifically seem like they come down to you're either getting free points or you should have picked a different objective because the dice didn't favor you. Whereas, scout the field, you just need to stand there.
So two questions in that case. First one is, if you just took all of the kill objectives and swapped it to flesh wound objectives, would that fix the problem for you?
I think so, but then I feel like they definitely become.
Too easy.
They might fall in. Yeah, they fall into your
Yeah,
category of, well, why don't we just remove them?
sure, sure. And then,
Yeah, or like just trigger an injury roll because in some
yeah,
cases, like the Geller pox, they don't get flesh wounds or stuff like that.
that is true. Yes. Um, okay, but so if I kind of don't want to move on to talking about the new primaries because I'm trying to specifically focus on secondaries. But as it is something we are questioning, domination, no, not domination. Technically, with secondaries, currently, there are no beyond this objective. So you're never actually, officially, doubling up on how many points you're getting for being on an objective. But of course, a lot of maps do have domination and a main objective, right? And mission critical supplies, but that's a ridiculous mission. Yeah? Are you following me? Yeah?
Mm-hmm.
Okay. So I assume, therefore, that on any map that has a middle objective, you are against also having domination as a secondary.
Yeah, I think so.
Yeah.
Okay.
So it's difficult. I think so from the perspective of secondary objectives. I think that was you made a very good categorization of like how do they play in, what categories do they fall in, that sort of thing. But
Is exactly the question I'm asking. Yes.
yeah, like I'm not sure that we've defined that very well. Like we do, like we think it makes the game more competitively balanced, and I agree with that. But we're always kind of tuning them for the hordes versus melee type thing.
Sure.
And it seems like everybody agrees that they're decent to good, but uh, they're not ideal right now. And I don't know if that's because we need to like fine tune them. Like, are we tuning the last 10%? Right? Like, secondary objectives, they're 90% correct, and we're just tuning the last 10%.
Sure.
Or are we at like 30%? We're like, hey, this is a rough draft. This is concept art. This is sketches. Like, maybe we need to go in a completely different direction. I don't know if we're which one of those we're actually at.
No, neither do I. But okay, fair enough. Yeah, like this isn't for anybody tuning in. This is not a stream that is going to give you any answers. I'm just throwing out questions and hoping somebody has them. That would be helpful. Or if I can kind of stick on one point and neither of you can say, actually, I don't like that for the X reason that is good, then maybe that is an answer. So, going on to what I said about Survivor, which is the one where you elect one of your models, and then if it's alive by the end of the game, you get victory points. I quite like that as a concept, where it is modifying an objective or adding an objective for both of you. It's giving you something to do, and it's giving the enemy a target to kill in this case. What are your thoughts on that kind of concept? Not specifically Survivor, but that in general. Bazzy, do you want to go first?
Yeah, I think it's an interesting concept. I haven't heard of it. This is the first time I'm hearing of it, and it sounds like it's cut off the head, but it's not really. It's like the opposite of it, and it's interesting to have that non-secret objective that you're both actively working towards. And like you said, I think it's a good experiment to try those objectives a little bit more, that because you're going for the primaries, where the primaries are, but you don't know about the secondaries until you start scoring them. So I think it would be nice to try experimenting with those types of secondaries as well that aren't hidden to your opponent.
Yes, that is another question that I'm going to very quickly write down. But Zero, what are your thoughts?
Yeah, I think it's a neat objective to try out. I don't know. I like it that it's so I like it that it's an objective where your opponent has made kind of a decision to, if they pick Survivor, you didn't necessarily plan for them to pick Survivor. You're not saying, oh, well, they're a horde team, so they're gonna pick domination and engage on all, something like that. And then you have to think on the fly, how am I going to complete my objectives, and how am I going to complete, or how am I going to complete score my primaries? How am I going to score my secondaries? And then how am I going to, kind of go this one extra step to deny by killing that model? Like it's a powerful secondary in that you can kind of, you're starting to be able to force your opponent into directions and make them make a value call, whether they're going to try and deny you those points and they think they can do it, or they are going to just say like, okay, I accept that I am going to give up these 3 secondaries because I think that my time is better spent focusing on, I think I can out execute you on my secondaries and primary objectives, and I will just cede to you those 3 points.
Yep. So, one person in the chat there quite rightly calls out, I feel, the obvious question. So if you're selecting a model from your team that you want to live for the whole round, as in Survivor, there's obviously already another model just like that in your team, who is your leader. When would you not pick your leader? Or should you just add a proviso at the end of that Survivor clause saying, cannot be a specialist, for example? Oh, sorry, that was an actual question. Would you ever not pick your leader?
Yeah, I don't think I'd...
Yeah.
Leader sounds like an obvious choice, but of course it will depend on like if you play a horde team, or like if you play custodians and have 2 models. Yeah.
Well, I think a pretty good little caption on the end of Survivor in that case would be either cannot be your leader, or, and I'm kind of liking the idea of this, cannot be a specialist. That seems like a fair thing to add. Can you think off the top of your head of any other sort of objective similar to that? That's a huge question, I realise. So probably not. But if you can, throw it out there.
Not at the top of my head, no.
Fair.
Yeah, I can't think of one.
No. Okay, in that case, let's go back quickly to the concept of open or closed secondaries. As you know, currently you draft 3 out of 6 secondary objectives, one of which is a mission-specific secondary that you either take or do not take, and you then reveal what your secondary is when you score it. So, the question to you guys is, have you ever played a secondary, a game where you've played with open secondaries? Have you tried that?
No, not really.
So like the free choice, pick any secondaries you want?
No. Just your opponent knows them when you draw them.
Oh, I did a teaching game once.
Okay, sure.
But not not beyond that.
What do you think of the notion of the idea that having open, so openly visible, let's say visible instead of open, visible secondaries kind of does a little bit of what Survivor does, in that it allows you to instantly play counterplay to whatever it is your opponent is trying to do. Do you like that idea, or do you like the current system of invisible secondaries? Bazzy first.
I like it, but I'm really wondering, like, is there a reason why we're limited to only the 6 in the pool? Is there a reason why we're not just opening up all of the objectives are on the table? You can pick 3.
Sure. So that is, yeah. Firstly,
I know that's a different question, but
no, yeah. Zero, do you want to answer, and then I will answer Bazzy's question.
I'd be willing to try it. I think that it might change. I think that it might change a little bit what secondaries pick, but I'm not really sure by how much. Like you can usually make step one of an educated guess of what secondaries your opponent is going to pick just based on what faction they are, and then like
Yes.
step two is you see people moving towards the board edge and you're like, oh gee, I wonder what you're doing. Or on the map, like when it's the if it's that arena map that has the center room that has the two doors going in, and it's like, all right, well, anything that has a center objective, and it's like, okay, well, score domination, that's easy. And then when it's in the center, it's very, very easy to score engage on all fronts because, your models can be right next to each other, but in 4 separate board quarters. So domination and engage on all fronts into secondary objective. You look at that map and you're like, as long as they're not custodies, you can almost guarantee that they should be taking those objectives. And then your choice is either, well, do I go for outside things? Like in that case, maybe I go for recon sweep because they're going to be piling everything into the middle. Maybe I go for scout the field because they're going to be piling everything into the middle. Or maybe you decide you're also going to take domination and engage on all fronts, and you're going to try and fight them off that or keep them from getting in there.
Yep. No, I agree generally. And I actually pitched this exact question to Michael T. Holy when I did my interview with him, which is not yet up on the channel, but he kind of agreed. You can pretty much guess. Like secondaries are pretty predictable, which is maybe an issue in itself. Why bother having closed secondary or invisible secondaries if you can pretty much guess it because they're kind of obvious? That is also a valid point, possibly. Anyway, Bazzy, going back to your question of why pick from a roster, if you will, or a list of 6 secondaries instead of the full 18? That is a question that is often asked. Different people have different preferences. Personally, my thoughts on should you be able to pick from the full 18 or only from whichever are specific to that mission are that you should have to pick from the mission because, and this is the core of it though, I do believe that secondary objectives should be pushing you to do something that you would not normally do. And because of that, if a team is allowed to pick from any of the 18 secondaries, they're probably always going to pick the same ones, and they're probably going to be reward-based secondaries or very easy to score. So, for example, engage on all fronts. Oh, if you're a horde team, you will basically always pick engage on all fronts, scout the field, and recon sweep, where you can deep strike 3 guys into the enemy zone. There's not really a point in running less than that, or any other objectives, because those are just the easiest to score. Like maybe in 1 or 2 matchups you wouldn't, but yeah, generally you're going to go with those. Which now I don't know if that's an issue of hordes or actually if the game is perfectly balanced as it is right now. You just need to remove those 3 secondaries and put another 3 in there, and the game fixes itself. I've never tried that. What are your thoughts on that? Specifically removing the very easy to score positionals. Thoughts, Bazzy? Oh, and did I answer your question as well? Sorry.
Yeah, it makes sense. It makes sense. You saying these work good together, so I should just bunch them up and use them. Also, I guess we do ask the question if secondaries are top tier and low tier. Are there like top tier secondaries that generally are easier, and are there low tier that should be rewarded more? Should you have a flexible point system, like this objective can score you just 2 points and this can score you the 4 points? is there an issue with having all of the objectives, secondary objectives, scoring the same amount of points?
I think that's a very valid point. Certainly, as I just said, those three, engage on all fronts, scout the field, and recon are potentially incredibly easy to score for any horde team. And it's certainly as an elite team fighting against that, even if you're getting lots of kills, doesn't matter. So yeah, perhaps another way of balancing it instead of removing those is to mean that on that particular map, perhaps those are still worth 1 point every every turn, but the other secondaries available are worth 2 points every turn. Zero, what are your thoughts?
So yeah, I don't. I've had for quite a while, but
You cut out for a moment there, Zero. Do you want to repeat that?
Oh, sorry. Yeah, I dislike Scout the Field.
Yeah.
Part of it is that even though you can't, if your deployment zone covers the whole edge, blah blah blah, but I take issue that you can score it in your deployment zone at all.
I agree.
So that's one piece that I don't like. And secondly, it is a secondary that rewards teams that can field bodies, which okay, that's okay. But if you're a very high, if you're a shooty team, you can shoot from scout the field, and if you're a shooty team, you can shoot at models that are scouting the field, from possibly a long distance. And so where this gets ugly is for melee teams that can't, so like for example, Harlequins, and like in the Harlequins channel, I think I've talked several times about if you think your opponent is going to take scout the field, you also need to take scout the field. And the reason is that if you don't, it's free points. So you either have to say, I'm going to give up those points, or you also take scout the field. And the reason is that unless you also take scout the field, you cannot dedicate a Harlequin to go out and kill one of your opponent's models that's doing scout the field. But if you take scout the field, as opposed to say cut apart, and you've got your leader sitting in the back, ideally near an objective as well, and then you have somebody else holding another edge, and now you send out a clown to kill, hopefully, and deny your opponent from playing scout the field. If you were to take cut apart and you fail to kill them, you now let them score scout the field, and you didn't score cut apart. But if you take scout the field as well, and you go out there, if you don't kill them, you now score scout the field. But if you do kill them, you not only score scout the field, you prevent them from scoring scout the field. And I still don't like scout the field, but that's how I've been able to kind of figure out how to play around it.
Okay. I see you're leaning hard on that, not liking killing secondaries. Yeah, which is fair. If
you're an elite and you're already do that kind of positional dominance without killing enemy models, so you need to kind of kill them in order to hold the objectives. Otherwise, they're going to just swarm you. But if you then also take killing secondaries, you're doubling down on I need to kill to win, as opposed to hopefully trying to pick up. Use your tough bodies to body block, and use them to score quadrants for engage on all fronts. Things like that. And instead of doubling down on I need to kill to win, now you can do, well, I need to hold some primaries, but I can body block to prevent them, and then hopefully kill them. But even if I don't, I'm still scoring positional secondaries.
Okay, so I don't want to talk about this too much, but I assume that you are both aware of the current feeling of some of the independent TOs about how they want to move to what did I decide it was called? Hold kill, where you have to, instead of getting 1 point for holding one objective, another point for holding a second objective, and another point for holding more than your opponent. You instead get 1 point for holding an objective, 1 point for holding more objectives than your opponent, 1 point for killing an enemy model, and then another point for killing more of your opponent's models than your opponent kills of yours. I assume you're both aware of this?
No.
Oh, okay. So, did I explain it well enough there, or did I stumble too much?
Yeah,
I did.
yeah,
Okay,
sure,
all right. Okay.
It makes
So, Fest is going to be run. I want to say it's how LVO is going to be played, but I'm not sure. Don't quote me on that. I'm not sure if Alex has actually released his pack yet. But anyway, I like the idea of it. However, the reason I bring this up is because a common counter to that as a way of playing is exactly that killing is already incentivized in the game, and there's no need to incentivize it more. Now, Zero, exactly what you were saying there was that by killing a single enemy model, you can not only potentially, you can deny the enemy one of their secondaries, potentially, obviously, even a primary. Killing is incentivized already. However, my thoughts. So I'm going to be honest. I currently like the idea of moving to the hold kill. I think that's a cool idea. However, do you think that perhaps it incentivizes it too much because of exactly what you just said, Zero?
I don't know. So it's
Oh,
the way that I am.
one proviso. Sorry, just as somebody in the chat pointed out there. If you were to change to that, you have to change all of the secondaries. Let's be super clear on that. So I don't think you should be able to play hold kill and take cut apart and bounty hunters. That would be insane, right? I think that goes without saying. The whole pack would have to change.
Yeah, sure.
Okay, with that said, would you now? This is why I'm talking about secondaries, because I don't know what the secondaries should change to. Would you like to continue there, Zero? Sorry.
Sure. So for the hold kill format, what I've been thinking about, or how I've been thinking about it, is that it's going to help elite teams a bit to a lot. It kind of depends on dice, I guess. But that you still are definitely going to need to focus on secondaries and how to deny your opponent from hold more. And so killing is one way, but body blocking is still really strong. I think that, I mean, I guess I just have my opinions on this, but I do not, even though I'm planning to take Azuriani to LVO, but I still do not see myself choosing kill secondaries unless I don't have another option, just because, again, I don't want to a 33% chance, assuming the opponent's in cover, a 33% chance of actually happening. So when, if I'm playing an elite team and my plan is to that I need 4 rounds of scoring to hit those 12 max points, and my plan is to hold one, kill more. Right, that's 3 points a turn. I need to score that 4 turns to max out my 12 primary points. And then I have my secondaries to consider. If I double down on, I need to, taking cut apart or something, I need to, or the kill with readied model, kind of things like that are, if I double down on that, I'm exposing myself more to dice and to variance than if I were to take engage on all fronts or to take scout the field. And so I think that it's absolutely a good format. I love the kill one, the kill hold format, but I'm definitely on the conservative side of, I don't know how much this is going to change how we should play the game.
How do you mean?
Well, I think that are positional based are going to be, and I think that one of the changes that both when list building and when playing is, if you go just all out and try and kill as many models as you can each turn, you may find yourself out of models to kill. And so, ideally, in that case, you should now be holding more, that sort of thing. But if you alpha strike, and your opponent just has a bunch of models that are hidden and that are scoring primary hold objectives, and then scoring positional secondaries, you need to start hunting models, because now they are denying you points. You have run out of models to kill. Like, so if you're facing a 5-man Space Marine squad and you're banking on kill more, that's a pretty bad idea, because you're going to run out of Space Marines to kill, and also they're hard to kill. But kind of that sort of thing. So I think that kind of tactical thinking is a larger change than just the, oh well, this is going to make elite teams great. Like, it's you're going to have to start.
Okay, fair. Bazzy, did you have any thoughts? As you've only just heard about this concept, you know.
Yeah, I'm really just racking my brain around like how since this is a fairly new thing for me with secondaries. It's a lot of new information to me.
Yeah.
But I'm trying to like get deeper into that. Like, I know there's like killy and the positional objectives, but there's no really combining the two. I don't know if that's something we can do to like combine two objectives into one and get them double the points, basically. Like, kill a specialist and basically like drag him back to your deployment zone or something like that.
So
I don't know if that's something that's been tested, like pretty much combining the two. I know it, like, if you don't get to kill that model in the first place, maybe you don't get to do the position, but maybe you could do the other way around or something like that.
so I quite like, as I've kind of, I think, inferred earlier, I quite like the notion of objectives give you more points if they take longer to complete. But yeah, I don't know. As I said, I don't really have any answers. But you know what? We've been going for an hour. And I think I've said everything I wanted to say. Did you guys have any final thoughts? Bazzy, did you want to give final thoughts?
No, it's a really big question with secondaries. I'm really excited about thinking like, okay, what can we do to like sort of invent a new wave of secondaries, and what can we do to balance the game? And it's coming from a casual standpoint. It's a lot to take in for me.
Sure, but do you like the idea of being rewarded for getting kills?
Yeah, I like the idea of secondaries overall. I think that they've added a lot to the game once I've started like experimenting with secondaries, and once I picked up the arena box, I think it added another element to the game for me, and I think it's going to be difficult for me to sort of go back to just playing narrative games
Oh,
from doing secondaries.
interesting. So you're a convert. I'll see you at the LGT, June
Yeah,
27th, 28th.
absolutely.
Excellent. Okay. And Zero, final thoughts about
Yeah,
anything there?
sure. I think that it's just really good for the community and good for the game that we're continuing to talk about secondaries, and that TOs like Sheldon and Alex are, and you now, of course, are thinking about this and are changing these things, because I think that it's there's no possible way that we have reached the ideal competitive format in one year, and I think that that playing around with missions and playing around with secondaries and playing around with 100 versus 125 points is what is going to keep the game attractive to existing players and new players, because it's people responding and making changes and keeping things interesting.
Okay. Well, thank you both very much for joining here. Also, thank you for being my patrons. It's really awesome of you to support me like that. Really helps. And hopefully, I will be able to pay it back to you by creating more Kill Team content. And thanks to everybody that has joined in to watch live. And I don't really know how YouTube works, but I assume this video will still be up later for people to watch back, not live. In which case, thank you to you too. Obviously, if you can't tell, I'm just a guy that wants to talk about Kill Team. I'd love comments, feedback. What are your thoughts on secondaries? Do you think there was anything either I didn't think of or Bazzy or Zero didn't mention in rebuttal to any of my points? Do you think we're going about the entire thing the wrong way? Do you think that actually the secondaries there are already good to go and other things need to be changed to balance the game? Do you think the game is already perfectly balanced? I don't know. Death Deny 3CP, 7-point drones. That's all I'm saying. But anyway, thank you very much, guys, for tuning in. Everybody, both my patrons and the viewers. I will continue to think about this, and hopefully you will be seeing the first drafts of the tournament pack, which will, of course, include my new custom secondaries within, like, 2 months, I guess. And yeah. All right. Thanks very much, guys. Do you want to say goodbye?
Bye, everyone.
Bye, everyone.
Goodbye, everybody. This has been Glass Half Dead and his beautiful Patreons. I hope you've had a good day. I hope you continue to have a good day. Goodbye.